Hey there, been a while hasn't it? Well, after close to 2 years since my last review and spending way too much of my focus on college and getting through my personal backlog of games and shows I've been watching and playing, it's time to do another review, and because Persona 3 Reload was taking too long, mainly because it's a 60 to 80 hour RPG with a 20 to 30 hour epilogue story, I'm scrapping the idea of reviewing that and going back to working on a review I had planned for a while only to scrap it. Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, I love Resident Evil. I've known of the series since about 2018 with RE7 and playing RE5 at a friend's house, but I didn't become a proper fan of the series until about a year later when I got the Switch version of the original RE4 and enjoyed the game for its action set pieces, fun cast of characters, and self-aware campy nature, and with that, boom, the series got a new fan. Fast forward to about a year later, around the time Resident Evil 3 Remake released and rumours of a remake of RE4 started making their way around online. And these rumours were met with a lot of cautious optimism because RE4 is a timeless classic, and the potential remake's, well, potential to fail left a lot of fans worried that said potential would end up tarnishing the legacy of the 2005 original. But thankfully, RE4 is to Capcom what Final Fantasy VII is to Square Enix and made sure that RE4's remake wasn't going to suck like RE3's remake. And when the remake eventually came out in March of 2023, it was met with praise from both critics and fans alike. Kinda helps that Capcom basically clung to the design of the original RE4 like a leech when the remake was still in development. But what do I personally think of it? Well, that's what this video is for. So with that being said, it's time to dig up an old abandoned project of mine and revive a review I planned for ages ago, and during the original RE4's 20th anniversary too, no less. Also, spoiler warning ahead because I'll be going over the full story. I say spoiler warning despite this being an over 2-year-old remake of a 20-year-old game. But anyway, I'm Cruel Alchemist and this is my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake. So for the people that are living under the biggest rock known to man, Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it's known as in Japan, is a survival horror series created by Capcom. The first game was conceived by producer Tokaru Fujiwara, who wished to make a game similar to Sweet Home, a 1989 RPG for the Famicom that he directed and was based on a movie of the same name, with the original Resident Evil being directed by Shinji Mikami, who was a planner and designer for some Capcom developed games at the time. Resident Evil 1 was released for the PS1 in 1996 and was praised for things such as its claustrophobic level design, inventory management, adding a layer of strategy and tension to a playthrough as you tried to plan ahead with the scarce item placement, and its laughably cheesy dialogue.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
The original Resident Evil 4 was released for the GameCube in January of 2005 for Japan and America, and March the same year for PAL regions after going through what was essentially development hell, consisting of the original build directed by Hideki Kamiya that went on to become the first Devil May Cry game, 3 different builds directed by Hiroshi Shibata, and then the final build after Capcom sort of forced Mikami into the director's spot due to how long the game was taking to develop. The game was met with universal acclaim from critics and fans alike, thanks to it being a game that both series veterans and newcomers alike could pick up and play, and saw release on several devices soon after. Meanwhile, development of RE4's remake started back in around late 2018 and was developed by Capcom's Division 1 team just as they were wrapping up development of RE2's remake. The team, namely the co-directors Kazunari Kodai and Yasuhiro Ampo, were initially reluctant on even making the remake since the original was held in such high regard by the fans. But they were determined to deliver something that was faithful to the original while modernizing it for newer fans who are familiar with the newer games like 7, Village, 2 Remake, and 3 Remake, like cutting out a lot of the dated fluff of the original like the quick time events and stiff tank controls. The story is still the same as the original, albeit with some minor changes. After narrowly surviving the Raccoon City incident in RE2, Leon S. Kennedy is scouted and somewhat forced to join US Stratcom because of his survival skills from during the Raccoon City incident. 6 years go by and Leon has received proper military training from his commander and mentor Jack Krauser, and suddenly the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, has been kidnapped with her last known location being in a rural part of Spain, so President Graham sends Leon to investigate, with Ingrid Hunnigan assisting Leon as mission control. Once Leon gets there, however, he sees that something is very wrong with the villagers who are known as the Ganado, as they're bloodthirsty, violent, and mysteriously come back to life after being killed. After narrowly surviving an assault from the Ganado, Leon heads to the lake Ashley might have been taken to, only to run into a man tied up in a bag, with Leon coming face to face with the village chief, Torres Mendez, who easily knocks him out and injects him with some kind of lava. Leon and the man he met before getting knocked out wake up in some kind of factory, and the man introduces himself as Luis Serra and points Leon in the direction of the local church if he wants to find Ashley. So Leon heads to the church only to find out he needs some sort of key in order to open up the gate blocking the entrance, which, after dealing with the lake's monster Del Lago and exploring around the area for a bit, Leon manages to find, also facing off against a monster called El Gigante on his way back to the church. And after using the key in order to open up the gate blocking the entrance to the church, Leon finally manages to get inside and rescue Ashley, and the two start making their way to the extraction point in order to head home. When they get there, the duo run into Luis and fend off a horde of Ganado, and after escaping from the horde, that's when Luis notices that Ashley is coughing up blood and realizes that she is infected with something known as Las Plagas, a parasitic organism that latches onto the host's nervous system and causes anyone infected to bend to the will of someone who's host to the dominant species of Las Plagas. With this in mind, Leon and Ashley decide to work with Luis in order to find a cure, as Luis splits up with the others for the time being, with Leon and Ashley taking shelter in a nearby castle after narrowly surviving an assault from Chief Mendez and the Ganado, and Leon ending the chief's life once and for all. Once inside the castle, Leon gets a radio call from Luis, who wants to deliver a suppressant for the parasites to Leon and Ashley and tells them to meet him in the courtyard, and on their way they come face to face with the ruler of the castle, Ramon Salazar. Salazar asks for Leon to hand Ashley over, but the two obviously decline this offer, with Salazar sending his zealots after the duo as the two work together to protect one another. However, after surviving an onslaught from the zealots, Ashley briefly loses herself to the will of Las Plagas as the parasite forces Ashley to be separated from Leon, threatening to take her life should Leon get too close, with Ashley running off in an understandable moment of fear and panic when she comes to. And doubly unfortunate for Leon, his comlink with Hunnigan is cut and the two can't get in contact for the rest of the game. While Leon takes the long route to get back to Ashley, he has a sudden run-in with Ada Wong, who miraculously survived her several 100-foot fall back in RE2. She tells Leon to forget about Ashley in order to try and ensure his own survival, but Leon has a job to do and he won't just easily give up on Ashley, as Ada leaves and Leon presses on until he eventually reunites with Ashley, ensuring that the two will make it out of their situation alive, as Ashley realizes that she and Leon have the same issue of being infected by Las Plagas. The duo make their way to the ballroom after getting another call from Luis, only for the zealots to try and kidnap Ashley after the way to the ballroom is opened up, with Ashley managing to evade capture from the zealots, which begins the remake's version of her playable segment. After dodging an assault from suits of armor infected with the Plaga, Ashley manages to help Leon escape, only to get kidnapped by one of Salazar's right-hand men known as the Verdugo. Meanwhile, on top of the castle walls, Ada reports her progress on collecting something called the Amber to her contractor, who advises her to be cautious when receiving Leon's help. She then notices Ashley being taken to the throne room and lets Leon know where to go next after he freed himself from the trap that he unknowingly sprung earlier. Leon gets to the throne room, but it's too late as Salazar initiates the ritual to make Ashley one of them by forcing her to ingest liquid to speed up the parasite's bond to Ashley's nervous system. Salazar's Verdugo then yeets Leon into the pit in the center of the throne room, with Leon narrowly surviving his fall, and after a cat and mouse fight between one of Salazar's Verdugo, Leon makes it to the mines where Luis gives Leon the medicine to temporarily suppress the parasite until it can be permanently removed from his body. body. So the duo of Leon and Luis venture through the mines, fending off the dangers within the mines such as Ganado and two El Gigante, with one of them being armoured, and then ride a minecart all the way to the nest of the Novistadors, these annoying as hell bug enemies that are a pain in the ass to deal with when facing them in game, and eventually make it back up to the lower area of the castle. However, it's not all good, as Luis unfortunately meets his end after getting stabbed in the back by Leon's old commander and mentor Jack Krauser. Leon puts two and two together and realizes that Krauser is the one who kidnapped Ashley before the events of the game. The two face each other in melee combat with their knives, and just as Krauser is about to kill Leon after getting the upper hand, Luis shoots Krauser's knife out of his hand, causing Krauser to retreat for the time being. With his dying breath, Luis hands over the key to his lab to Leon and tells him to remove the parasites and help Ashley as Leon heads back up to the castle with newfound resolve, and Ada letting him know that Salazar and his goons have taken Ashley to the clock tower. Leon makes his way through one final assault from Salazar's zealots before making his way to the top of the clock tower just as Krauser takes Ashley away from the area. Salazar then starts going on about the gift Leon has received thanks to Las Plagas before Leon promptly shuts him up in what is one of my favourite moments in the remake.
You talk too much. Failed!
Salazar mutates into a monstrous form to try and kill Leon, but Leon comes out on top and makes it to the boat dock just beyond the Salazar boss arena just as Krauser takes off with Ashley. He sees that a boat is still there for him to chase after Krauser with Ada revealing herself with the boat key. As the two follow Krauser, Leon talks about the Raccoon City incident and asks Ada if she's changed at all since the incident. Ada sort of dodges the question as they make it to the edge of the island that Ashley was taken to before Ada takes her leave and Leon battles his way through the island's workers to get to Ashley. Leon reunites with Ashley just in time to administer the Plaga suppressant before it takes over her body, and the duo start to make their way to the summit of the island where Luis's lab is located. Eventually they get to a storage room containing the deposits of amber that contain the parasites that Luis mentioned to Leon back in the mines. And then the purple-robed man from the Plaga visions the two have been having throughout the game reveals himself, introducing himself as Osmond Sadler, the leader of the cult Los Illuminados who wish to control the world by infecting everyone with Las Plagas. He takes control of Ashley and tries to force her to kill Leon, but she's able to resist and not kill Leon with his gun as it jams after the first two shots because she limp-wristed her shots, resisting the parasites to shoot at Sadler's followers, which is also a really cool detail about this scene in my opinion. While Sadler failed to kill Leon by forcing Ashley to do it even though he could have very easily killed Leon himself, Sadler takes Ashley away to the altar at the top of the mountain so Sadler can have her will be submitted to Las Plagas, with Leon chasing after her only to end up coming face to face with Krauser, who engages in combat with Leon one last time. During the fight, Krauser shows off that he too has the Plaga inside of him as his arms mutate into this cool blade and shield combo, but in the end Leon comes out on top using Krauser's knife to finish the job, with Krauser saying that he taught Leon well before passing on. Leon makes his way up to the summit only to be assaulted by the island workers, but in comes Mike, a helicopter pilot sent by Hunnigan to aid Leon in rescuing Ashley. The two get through the horde with relative ease, but the help is cut short as Sadler's Novistadors cause Mike's helicopter to spin out and crash, killing him in the process as Sadler watches from afar. Leon continues to make his way to the altar and eventually reaches Ashley, but Sadler freezes him and starts to have him give in to the parasite's will, before Ada shows up and gives Leon enough time to escape with Ashley and reach Luis's lab on the island and remove the parasites from their bodies. Now finally free of the parasites, the duo make their escape only to spot Ada being hung up as bait for Leon by Sadler. Leon goes over and frees Ada, only for Sadler to pop up and attack Leon. Ada helps Leon and the two start unloading their handguns on Sadler, who then mutates in a moment of rage before facing Leon head on. Sadler goes down only to mutate even further, with Leon unloading everything he has before Ada gives him a special rocket launcher that allows Leon to weaken Sadler, with Leon killing him by stabbing Sadler with his religious stick thing, thus finishing him off once and for all. Ada finally gets the amber she's been trying to obtain, which contains the dominant species of Los Plagas that allowed Sadler to control everyone infected with the parasites, and gets on her evac helicopter, tossing Leon a key as the island starts to explode. Leon and Ashley make their escape, seeing the islanders and parasites dying since they no longer have Sadler to control them, and the duo make their escape on a jet ski left behind by Ada just as the island starts to blow up. Ashley thanks Leon for rescuing her and offers him a position to work for her, but Leon reassures her that she's capable of looking after herself as they ride home, and Hunnigan finally reestablishes contact with Leon. Meanwhile, in a post-credit scene, Ada lets her contractor know that she has obtained the amber, and this mysterious contractor is revealed to be Albert Wesker. Wesker tells Ada of his plans to push humanity's evolution forward, saying that billions of lives will be given so that what's left of the people can thrive in a new age of humanity. But Ada doesn't want any part of that, so she forces her helicopter pilot to change course, and as they do, Ada catches a glimpse of Leon and Ashley riding back to the US on a jet ski, ending the main story of Resident Evil 4 Remake. The story is very beat for beat, sort of like Resident Evil 1's remake, but with some key differences. For starters, the presentation is great. The RE engine has had time to improve over the 6 years it has been since the release of RE7 and RE4R, and it shows. The world of RE4 has been reimagined in a way that feels familiar to players of the 2005 original, while making them new and interesting for newer fans. However, a small handful of set pieces have been moved over from the main story to separate ways, but I'll talk about those a little more when I get to talking about separate ways later in the review. The characters have also been redesigned in a way that feels familiar but also new, which helps with the fact that these are reimagined takes on these characters. But what the hell is up with Ada's outfit? I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan. I get that the team at Capcom were probably trying to go for a more tactical approach with Ada's clothing in the remake, but it loses a lot of the femme fatale charm that Ada's known for, especially in her earlier appearances. Which is why I'm glad that you can unlock an alternate outfit that gives her a dress reminiscent of her OG RE4 outfit by beating separate ways, which I ended up sticking with when getting footage for the review. Other than that, I think all the outfits for the other characters are fine, and I love that one of Leon's alternate costumes is just having his jacket for the entire game, which is awesome in my opinion. In fact, I think all the classic outfits are faithfully reimagined in the remake, which is nice to see. The voice acting is also a vast improvement compared to the original. Leon sounds more grounded here, like he feels guilty for letting the people he could have saved in Raccoon City just die because of situations that were out of his control. He carries a trauma that haunts him and wants to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen ever again. While Paul Mercier's performance is iconic, Nick Apostolidis is my favourite Leon voice actor. He brings just enough seriousness with witty charm to balance out the whole performance, even getting to say a lot of Leon's one-liners. Some have been shuffled around or outright removed, which is a shame, but the ones that are still there are good to hear. Nick also did a video with IGN where he said a lot of the one-liners which were cut from the remake, which is a fun watch. I recommend if you have the time. Ashley is arguably the person who got the most improvement in terms of character. While she is mostly unchanged story-wise, her portrayal feels more realistic and grounded. When Leon first meets her, she is reasonably scared regarding her situation, even when Leon reassures that he'll keep her safe. And while she still remains a damsel in distress like in the original, she does more to pull her weight when traveling with Leon, and her being separated from Leon or being kidnapped is done in what I consider to be a more believable way than in the original. She also has a lot of fun moments with Leon. The two get to have some fun banter between each other in a way that OG Ashley and Leon didn't have. Like just before entering the Plaga storage room where the two first meet Sadler, Ashley mentions the possibility of being an agent like Leon and protecting the US from any and all threats. It's little moments like this that give the remake's version of the two a deeper bond and more heartfelt moments between them. Luis is another character that got a major improvement in the remake. In the original RE4, he was an officer from Madrid that ended up working for Sadler as a researcher on Los Plagas before realizing just how insane Sadler was and wanted to help out Leon when he first encountered him. Now in the remake, they changed his backstory so now that he was a researcher for Umbrella's European branch, and not just that, but the team in Umbrella Europe that created the Nemesis. Pretty interesting change to make, and in my opinion it makes the whole being hired by Sadler as a researcher thing more believable, since Remake Luis has actual experience with this sort of thing due to his time at Umbrella. He's also gotten way more screen time than in the original, and he teams up with Leon in the mine section where the two exchange some witty banter, which was nice to see. And his death feels more impactful, especially since it's how Krauser is introduced in the remake, which I think is a great way of introducing him in my opinion. Ada... oh boy, Ada. Okay, so while I did somewhat enjoy her presence in the remake, her vocal performance made her sound really bored throughout all of it. Ada in the remake is voiced by Lily Gao, who played Ada in the mid-credits scene of Welcome to Raccoon City, and while she did do an alright performance, she has room to improve if she ever reprises her role in the future. However, the backlash she received just after launch was very much unnecessary. If you didn't like Lily's performance in RE4R, then just say so without making such a massive scene about it. Other than that, I found her performance decent. A little better in separate ways, but you can tell there's room for improvement if she ever comes back to voice Ada in a future game. As I said, Krauser being introduced by killing Luis was a better way of introducing him rather than him just randomly showing up out of nowhere like in the original RE4. And while he still does that here, I think it's better here than in the original RE4 because it's also when Luis is killed off, because it immediately signals to newer fans just how dangerous Krauser is due to him quickly and quietly killing Luis with such ease. Krauser's voice is also so much more gritty in the remake. He sounds very resentful towards the government for trying to cover up the Operation Javier incident, which gets elaborated on in the remake. And while his motivation for working with Sadler has changed from working as an undercover agent for Wesker to wanting absolute power to help Los Illuminados in taking over the world, part of me feels like he also wants to avenge the comrades he lost during Operation Javier, even if he says he doesn't want that just before the fight against him on the island. As for the two antagonists of the game, Salazar and Sadler, they really just have the visual upgrade and that's about it. The codex-styled conversations between Leon and Salazar are completely gone from the remake. Now, Salazar just taunts Leon over the PA system in the castle, and while he did taunt Leon in the original, what made it effective was how Salazar was able to ham it up in a way that made his character fun and endearing. Now, here in the remake, it feels like he's just this insane individual who's under the influence of the parasites and Sadler, which to me strips away some of the charm of his character. Also, less of a criticism, more of a nitpick, but you also don't get chased by the statue anymore. It's now just an obstacle during the climb up the clock tower that you can easily get rid of by shooting at an exposed barrel on the back of the head. Not to mention, the statue has the original Salazar look and not the remake look for some reason. Sadler is even worse in this case because up until he finally reveals himself at the end of the game, he's only seen in these Plaga-induced visions that Leon has throughout the entire game. And when he does reveal himself, there's only about 1 to 2 or so hours left of the game, while in the original RE4 he shows up the moment Leon rescues Ashley in the church, which gave the original plenty of time to flesh Sadler's character out and build him up as this genuine threat that's entertaining because, like Salazar, Sadler's able to ham up the scenes he's in. Here in the remake, however, Sadler barely has any time to be properly developed as this genuine threat, and his biggest moment and the closest he gets to hamming up any of the scenes he's in is at the altar when Leon and Ashley come this close to being fully under the will of the parasites. So in short, he's been downgraded from a hammy villain that's built up to feel like a genuine threat to a standard world domination type villain that's just insane, and that just feels very generic to me. Because like I said about Salazar, it strips away some of the charm of Sadler's character. Other than Salazar and Sadler, I think the characters are reimagined well and the story has been remade in a way that feels more natural and grounded. And while it does have its fun from time to time, it'll never beat the fun, self-aware nature of the original RE4's plot, and that's fine, but there's clearly a few wrinkles that could have been ironed out. As for the controls in combat, it's a significant step up from the original. Gone are the stiff tank controls, only being able to pan the camera and only standing still in order to use your weapons, and in its place are buttery, smooth and responsive controls that allow for full character and camera movement. Leon feels nice to control and everything feels tighter and more precise overall. Crafting has also been added to the game by combining either gunpowder or one of the knives found in the environment along with some materials. The player can obtain different types of ammo and grenades to help them keep going and make sure they have just enough resources for the battle ahead. The knife also saw some major changes, some good and some bad. The bad is that it now takes up space in the inventory and has durability, but that's pretty much where the bad points end, as there's a lot of cool new additions to the knife's capabilities. For starters, you can now do stealth kills with it, which can majorly help when thinning out how many enemies you have to deal with, as well as when it comes to picking and choosing your battles. Another addition to the knife is the ability to parry or block certain attacks, and getting a parry allows the player to follow up with a melee attack, making it a great crowd control tool if you manage to pull it off. The boss fights have also been improved. In the original, they could be hit or miss, but now these feel more faster paced and put your skills to the test in a way that I think the original never did. There's also technically an additional boss fight against Krauser, as the removal of QuickTime events in cutscenes changes the knife fight against him from a long cutscene where you needed to press button prompts to avoid being killed, to a fight that tests just how good you are with the knife's parry mechanic, while Krauser and Leon talk about an event that requires you to play a rail shooter spin-off to understand. While most of the bosses do feel like nothing more than visual upgrades, the fights have been given improvements such as new attacks, the entire boss arena being much bigger in Krauser's case during his fight on the island, and the Novistadors assisting Sadler in his case that helped to make the fights feel new and engaging in the remake. Ashley has been given some major changes for the better. For starters, she doesn't have a health bar anymore, so healing items are easier to manage. But if she gets hit once, Ashley will become incapacitated and Leon will need to go over to her and help her back up to her feet, but if she gets hit again, she dies. Her being incapacitated is also an easy way for an enemy to grab her, and just like in the original, you get an instant game over if she's taken too far from you. But luckily, you can approach an enemy from behind and knife them in order to free Ashley, or you can shoot them if they're too far for you to knife, but be careful not to accidentally shoot Ashley and give yourself a game over like an idiot when trying to free her. A mechanic that went largely unchanged was the merchant. The ever so mysterious black hooded figure is back and here to sell all kinds of wares to Leon for the right amount of pesetas. The merchant can now also repair the knife for a price that goes up the more badly damaged it is. Same for the body armor, which you now get about halfway into the castle section rather than the beginning of the island section like in the original RE4. Spinels have also been reworked. In the original, spinels were a sellable gemstone that you could find a lot of, usually from enemies dropping them or being a treasure that you found pretty much everywhere. Now they're a currency for the merchant's new trading system. With spinels you can trade for various items, ranging from maps that reveal the locations of treasures in the current area to treasures that you can then sell for pesetas, to different attaché cases that have passive abilities, to even weapons and attachments for them like the Punisher and Matilda for example. The primary source of getting spinels are the requests scattered throughout the game. Originally there was only like one request that got you the Punisher for free upon completion. Now in the remake there are several of these that give you varying amounts of spinels once completed and turned in the next time you do business with the merchant. And these requests range from shooting blue medallions like in the original to selling specific items to even fighting souped up versions of regular enemies. Something you can also do when you sometimes run into the merchant is play the shooting gallery, which puts your skills to the test by having you shoot at wooden cutouts of pirates with a preset selection of weapons. You get penalized if you shoot at the sailors that sometimes pop up, and managing to fulfill that challenge's bonus condition will initiate a bonus time segment where you can score more points and achieve an S rank for that challenge. After completing a challenge, you'll earn some tokens that can be used on this gotcha capsule machine that earns you different charms that can be attached to the attaché case to grant different passive effects. You can also often earn duplicates, but they can easily be sold off to the merchant for a couple hundred pesetas each. After beating the game, you'll get a final screen showing off your endgame rank along with your completion time, difficulty played, and the amount of times you saved the game. And completing the game on higher difficulties with higher completion ranks can unlock some nifty gear for New Game Plus playthroughs. All the previous unlockables from the original RE4 make their return, those being the Matilda, which is now one of the tradable items from the merchant, the Infinite Rocket Launcher, the Hand Cannon Magnum, the Chicago Typewriter, now known as the Chicago Sweeper, the Pinstripe outfit for Leon, and the suit of armor for Ashley that makes her unable to take any damage or be taken away by enemies. The only bonus item that didn't return was the PRL 412 laser gun that allowed you to instantly kill any enemy in just one shot. There's also some extra unlocks such as extra costumes that let Leon and Ashley have their coat on or off for the entire game, and different accessories that can grant passive abilities like being able to use aim assist on any difficulty or having access to infinite ammo amongst other things. These all require completion points which make their return from RE3 Remake and Village, and just like in those games you earn them by completing in-game challenges. So go and unlock all those cool bonus weapons and costumes and watch as you easily net yourself an S+ completion rank on all of the game's difficulties. This would be the end of the review, but it wouldn't be RE4 without the Mercenaries mode and Ada's campaign Separate Ways, and in April of 2023 the Mercenaries mode released, with Separate Ways following in September the same year alongside an update to Mercenaries that added Ada and Wesker as playable characters. I'm gonna do the Mercenaries first because it's not gonna take me super long to talk about this. So, Mercenaries, the fan-favorite Scar Attack mode that's been a staple of most Resident Evil games since the original RE3. The gameplay loop hasn't changed much either. You have a selection of characters with their own set of resources and a choice of 4 stages to pick. Once you picked your character and stage, the round begins. At the start, you have 2 minutes to kill as many enemies as possible and score as high as you can, but you can extend the time you have by collecting these hourglass orbs or by killing enemies with either headshots or melee attacks. The amount of bonus time you get will also increase slightly the more enemies you kill, and after killing enough enemies, one of the brute type enemies will appear. There's also a meter at the bottom that once filled up allows you to activate a character's mayhem mode. It depends on the character, but for Leon and Ada it increases their power and reload speed. The round will end once the player has either killed 150 enemies or dies, and after that you will receive your final score along with your rank, the highest possible rank being S++. The Mercenaries being added into the remake also brought back the unlock requirement for the hand cannon from the original RE4, which was to get an S rank with every character in every stage. Except you don't need to do it with every character like in the original, so now you can just pick your favourite character to play as and have a blast as you go for a high score in the stages. I only did a round with Leon and Ada because I only have so much time in my life and I didn't want to spend too long on the Mercenaries anyway. I don't mind the Mercenaries, but it gets kind of repetitive in the end, and I feel like that'll eventually make me bored of the mode. So yeah, anyway, that was Mercenaries. Now on to Ada's campaign, Separate Ways. Separate Ways begins with Luis being held in a prison cell in the castle as he dances away while someone else being held prisoner gets killed by some zealots. As they go over to Luis's cell, the one in white clothing takes out the zealots and reveals themselves to be Ada in disguise. Ada and Luis leave to go and retrieve the amber, but they get ambushed by one of Salazar's Verdugo, with Ada telling Luis to go fetch the amber and rendezvous with her at the church later while she takes out the zealots and fights the Verdugo head on. Ada is able to take it down as the Verdugo vanishes for the time being and makes her way outside to make contact with Wesker to let him know the current status of the mission. Ada makes her getaway from the castle, dodging zealots and their catapults as the Verdugo watches from afar just as Ada leaves. Ada monologues about Wesker hiring her to retrieve the amber and who will pay the price regarding how it's used in the future, saying that she made peace with the fact it's better not to ask about the who or why regarding these sorts of things until the Raccoon City incident back in RE2 when she met Leon for the first time. Ada lets Wesker know that she's en route to meet up with Luis and starts to make her way to the church. This is also when the main story starts, as when Ada makes her way to the church, she spots Leon fighting against the Ganado horde at the beginning of the main story. Ada eventually makes her way to the church, only to see that Luis is nowhere to be found. Oh gee, I wonder what happened to him. Ada then proceeds to ring the church bell as a way of helping Leon out. This is also the first of a handful of cutscenes from Ada's perspective. So after Ada rings the church bell, she gets a call from Wesker who lets her know that he lost Luis's signal near the forest, with Ada suggesting she goes over to Chief Mendez' house to see if there's anything to find regarding Luis's current location. But as she makes her way there, she's assaulted by the Verdugo once again and proceeds to fight it before it flees after taking too much damage, and Ada fails to finish it off. Once Ada gets to Mendez' house, she sees that Leon is being choked to death by Mendez and fires a couple of shots to stop him, and Mendez takes his leave from his house for the time being. After Leon also leaves the area, Ada heads into the chief's house to see if she can find where they took Luis and finds out that they took him to the old factory nearby. Ada starts to head there, but she's ambushed by Chief Mendez and gives chase, with Ada narrowly slipping past him and the Ganados he's with. Ada heads to the basement of the factory and finds Luis to be nowhere, but sees that he wrote his radio frequency on the pack of cigarettes that Ada gave him at the beginning of Separate Ways. Ada gets in contact with him and Luis tells Ada to go to the house past the windmill in order to get the amber, but as she gets out of the factory, she's assaulted by enemies and loses consciousness when she gets outside while surrounded. She then wakes up in Chief Mendez' house and is greeted by Wesker, who tells her to get the amber and stop wasting his time, saying that he has no use for Ada's incompetence as he leaves. With Ada making her way to the house Luis mentioned after receiving another radio call from him. When Ada gets there, she notices the Ganado horde surrounding the area, but she doesn't have time for that as she gets attacked by an El Gigante, which she swiftly takes care of. She then meets up with Luis, who unfortunately doesn't have the amber on him, but goes to get it with Ada back at the castle. Once they get to the castle, Luis tells Ada that he needs to go get the suppressant for Las Plagas for Leon and Ashley. Ada demands to know why, and Luis tells Ada that she too is infected with Las Plagas. Ada agrees to do this, and Luis lets Leon know about the suppressants before the duo of Ada and Luis go to retrieve them, only to find out that the place where Luis was storing them has been burnt to the ground by the zealots. Luis is distraught by this, but Ada tells him to simply make more, so Luis writes out the ingredients needed to make the suppressants, and Ada goes to get them while Luis goes to get the amber. After Ada gets the first ingredient for the suppressant, we get the cutscene where Leon encounters her for the first time from her perspective, where she leaves out of the window she opened and continues to gather the suppressant's ingredients. When Ada's almost at the location of the third ingredient, we get the cutscene of her reporting her progress to Wesker and letting Leon know that one of the Verdugo is taking Ashley to the throne room. Ada manages to get the last ingredient to make the suppressant just as Luis rendezvous with her and makes the suppressant. However, once Luis injects the suppressant, it doesn't appear to work, and not only that, but the other Verdugo shows up and Ada tells Luis to get the suppressants to Leon and Ashley and that they'll meet up later. And while hiding from the Verdugo, the suppressant finally starts to work its magic just as the Verdugo gives up searching for Ada and leaves. Ada proceeds to make her way through the castle's sewer system, following indicators of where to go that were left by Luis, and eventually makes it to the mines where she has one last encounter with the Verdugo. Ada tries to take it down by bringing down a loose platform, but unfortunately for her, the Verdugo mutates into its true form, the U3, or Pesanta as it's known as in the remake. Ada fights Pesanta head-on until it's down for the count, but then the tail rips off of the main body and proceeds to try and kill Ada with some help from the Novistadors, but Ada still comes out on top. killing the tail, which also causes Ada to cough out the Las Plagas parasite in her body, ridding herself of the infection just as Luis calls Ada during the first Krauser fight in the main story to tell Ada that Krauser has stolen the amber, and that he was glad he was able to do some good in his life for once before assisting Leon, with Ada making it to the area where Leon fights Krauser as she sees Leon go over to Luis and sees Krauser run off. Ada lets Leon know that Ashley has been taken to the clock tower and proceeds to give chase after Krauser, eventually seeing Leon about to face off against Salazar before she continues going after Krauser, reaching the boats just as he takes off to the island with Ashley, with Ada seeing Leon get to the other boat before revealing herself to him with the boat key in hand. The same boat ride cutscene happens, but now we see that Ada stuck a tracker to Leon just as she leaves, and then we cut to her spying on Sadler with her sniper as she spots Krauser giving him the amber. Wesker shows up and tells Ada there's been a slight change in plans as he hands her a briefcase, with Ada leaving for the coordinates Wesker gives her. While fighting her way through the island workers, Ada spots Leon and Ashley just as they get ready to head for Luis's lab, with Leon radioing Ada on where to go and Ada telling him to head for the island summit. Meanwhile, Ada makes her way to the island's comm room, fighting her way through more island workers and this big hulking monster near the comms room to where she arms explosives that Wesker plans to blow up the island with. Ada points out that this could kill Ashley and make things harder for Wesker, and Wesker tells Ada that he doesn't have room for half measures in his plan to change the world and that the weak exist to serve the strong. Yada yada, all that Darwinism stuff that drives him to push humanity's evolution forward in RE5, and then he tells Ada to get him the amber. Ada is very clearly against the idea of causing a casualty as big as the death of the president's daughter, so she plugs a USB dongle into the laptop Wesker gave her and types in some code that results in the explosives not going off simultaneously when their explosions trigger, and gets ready to finally go and retrieve the amber for Wesker, escaping from the monster from earlier as Ada narrowly dodges the lasers from the laser room and cuts the monster into pieces. Ada gets to the other side of the island and makes her way to the altar where Sadler is about to have Leon given to the parasite's will before she creates the distraction that allows Leon to grab Ashley and get to Luis's lab, and then proceeds to face Sadler head on. Ada eventually gets the upper hand and beats him, but just as she gets a hold of the amber, Sadler pops back up and captures her. The game then cuts to the cutscene before the final boss from Ada's perspective as she goes to get the rocket launcher to help Leon finish off Sadler. I also love this little moment just before Ada reaches Leon where Ashley asks Ada to help him. It's a cute little interaction between the two in my opinion. Anyway, Leon kills Sadler, Ada retrieves the amber and makes her getaway on a revac helicopter. The same post-credits cutscene from the main story happens, with Ada reporting her success to Wesker and Wesker explaining his future plans, with Ada having the helicopter pilot change course because, unlike Wesker, Ada has a moral compass and doesn't wish to have a hand in causing the near extinction of humanity in the name of evolution, as she spots Leon and Ashley jet skiing back to the US. After the results screen, the game transitions into Separate Ways' post-credits scene where, despite Ada's little act of defiance as Wesker puts it, his plans still move forward as he already has what he needs, as he retrieved Krauser's corpse, which still contains the dominant species Las Plagas parasite Wesker wants to use in his plans for evolution. As he walks to the front of his ship, the last thing Wesker says is that soon the sun will set on the age of man. This is obviously teasing towards an eventual remake of RE5, but I hope there isn't one for a while, especially given current rumours of upcoming projects within the series, as well as RE9 coming next year, which I'm pretty hyped for. But with that, that is the story of Separate Ways, and honestly, it's an upgrade in every way possible. The original Separate Ways was basically just the main story from Ada's perspective as she went through the motions as she tried to obtain the dominant species Plaga for Wesker. And while that's still the case here with the remake, I feel like there's more here that helps to enrich the story. Firstly, Ada is a lot better here than she is in the main story. She even gets to spout out a couple one-liners here and there. Not as iconic as Leon's, but it helps to give Ada a bit of snark to her character since she doesn't have as much charm as she does in the original. Her being infected with Las Plagas also gives her a bit of agency in her story besides finding the amber with Luis's help, because now she also has to find a way to remove remove the parasite from her body before she becomes like the Ganado. Lily Gao's performance is also better here than in the main story thanks to these little moments with Ada. It's not a massive improvement compared to the main story, but it helps Ada sound less bored, and like I said, the occasional one-liners help give Ada a bit of snark that she doesn't have in the main story. Luis doesn't really see much improvement to his character. He's still the guy who wants to help Leon and Ashley in order to feel better about himself while also helping Ada with her parasite problem. He's mostly along for the ride as he was a somewhat important character in OG Separate Ways, but I really enjoyed Remake Luis, so this is okay in my book regardless. Wesker, oh my fucking god, Wesker. Okay, let's start with his voice first. It's bad. It's really, really bad. Honestly, I think Donegan said it best in his Everything Wrong with Resident Evil 4 Remake video.
Fine. Keep your mud. But don't come crying to me if you get bit.
With all the complaints directed toward Ada's acting performance, we mustn't forget to roll out the red carpet for Wesker's new voice actor, who takes Unremarkable to a whole new level by not even attempting to sound like the guy.
Wesker doesn't even have the suaveness in his voice like before, and now he just sounds too overly serious about everything that goes on, and I don't really like it that much. It just makes Wesker sound like a generic villain who's hell-bent on world domination rather than a strategic mastermind who has some sense of class and style when it comes time to get his hands dirty. I do, however, like how more involved he is in Separate Ways. He mostly stuck to the sidelines and observed Ada's progress in the original, but now he does a little more to aid Ada in completing her mission and furthering his own goals by extension. There's not a whole lot to say about Pasanta other than making it the second of Salazar's Verdugo was a nice improvement, as it gives it more to do than just merge with Salazar to become his mutated form that Leon fights in the original. As for gameplay, it's largely the same as in the main story, although Ada has a couple different weapons and tools to play around with. One of these tools is her grappling hook. When traversing the area, Ada can use it to reach certain places or progress through the environment by getting close to the grapple point and pressing the corresponding button prompt. She also moves really gracefully when using it, which is nice to see in motion. In combat though, it's a godsend. If you stagger an enemy from a distance, you can use the grappling hook to close the distance and deliver a satisfying roundhouse kick. This also applies to if you grapple to a platform that has an enemy by the edge, and in both cases it really helps with crowd control. Ada doesn't get to play the shooting gallery, so instead attaché case charms are bought with pesetas in Separate Ways, and you can trade 5 spinels for a case charm that allows Ada to use her grappling hook to rip away shields from enemies that have them, which is great in limiting their defensive options. A lot of things from Leon's story in the original have been given to Ada as well. I've already mentioned Pasanta or U3 and the laser room Ada now goes through to get to the comms room, but there's also the gondola ride from the original that Ada now takes on her way to the comms room. There's nothing wrong with adding more to Separate Ways to make it feel new and fresh, but I do think it's a little odd that they went with taking some of the set pieces from Leon's story in the original and transferring them over to Ada's story in the remake. There's also some new areas thrown in, like the final stretch to the comms room has this big battlefield type area with the remote turrets that you have to move in order to slip past, and these massive shielded turrets that will spot you and open fire the moment you leave any cover. There's also the sewer area as you make your way to the mines, which ends up being more expansive than the waterworks in the original. And as I sit here writing the script, I'm only now realizing just how many set pieces from Leon's story were given to Ada in the remake. Because not only does Leon never visit the castle sewers in the remake, but Ada's venture into them is also when she first encounters the Novistadors, just like Leon in the original RE4. The only difference is that Leon traversed through a waterway in the original, and Ada goes through a fully blown sewer area in the remake. Much like in the main story, the boss fights are all improvements across the board. There's no fight against Krauser towards the end of Separate Ways like in the original, but there's more boss fights thanks to the 2 fights against Passanta before the final fight against it in the mines. I feel like the bosses in Separate Ways also require you to stay on your toes more than the bosses in the main story, but that might be because of Ada having a couple extra moves at her disposal, like the knife follow-up melee attacks. Leon had these as well, but the ones in Separate Ways feel more cinematic in my opinion. Especially the one for the El Gigante fight where Ada zips around El Gigante with her grappling hook before delivering a Swiss strike to its exposed Plaga with her knife like she's in Attack on Titan, which was cool to see in motion when I did the melee follow-up in the fight. I do wish there were more varied boss fights, however. While I am glad there's more of them, 5 in the remake as opposed to 3 in the original, 3 of those 5 are against Passanta, and the first 2 fights against it are just the same fight back to back, just one takes place in the castle at the beginning of Separate Ways and the other takes place in the main village area about half an hour or so after the initial fight. I think what would have helped provide more variety is if the Krauser fight from the original was still in the remake. I don't know how they do it, but it would have been nice to still have his fight in the remake version of Separate Ways, and it would have helped with evening out the ratio of boss fights against Passanta and the boss fights against other characters. Separate Ways also has unlockables for completing the story. You can unlock the Chicago Sweeper and proceed to mow down enemies to Kingdom Come like in the main story. You can unlock Ada's version of the Primal Knife by completing all 7 merchant requests in Separate Ways, and unlike the Primal Knife in the main story, it already has infinite durability. And there's a selection of outfits you can unlock. You can get the dress outfit I have equipped for Ada as well as her dress from the RE2 remake, and Luis and Wesker have outfits you can unlock that are based on their outfits from the original RE4. The unlockables require completion points just like the main story unlockables, and Separate Ways comes with its own set of in-game challenges to beat and earn completion points. So go and get those points, unlock the Chicago Sweeper, and enjoy speeding through the game taking out enemies in a mere couple seconds, much like you would in the main story. But all in all, what we have here is an incredibly solid remake of a classic action horror game that's able to bring in new fans while also providing a fresh experience for older fans like myself, without feeling like a replacement for the original RE4, as there's a few unique things to the original that aren't in the remake. Just because the remake now exists doesn't mean you should completely neglect the original and not play it, especially if you're a newer fan of the Resident Evil series, because despite the limitations of the original RE4, it's a timeless classic that can be enjoyed at any time you decide to try and give it a shot, and also set the standard for action games to come in the future generations of gaming. It's also very easy to get, as you can get the original RE4 on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, and there's a VR version for the Oculus Quest. It doesn't have Separate Ways, but you can still enjoy the main story and Mercenaries if you ever decide to pick it up, and it's a pretty immersive way to play the 2005 original. The PS5 version of the remake also has a VR mode for the PSVR 2, which looks really fun. I sadly don't have a PS5 or the PSVR 2, but if you do, then you should give the VR mode a try if you end up picking up the remake at some point. But with that being said, this is the end of my review of the game. I was hoping to try and get this out before the release of the Switch 2, but with us being well over 2 months into the console's release, I obviously couldn't. But I've been enjoying playing with the system and the games I have for it, like Mario Kart World, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 Edition, and Donkey Kong Bonanza. As for my next review, well, that's probably gonna take a while, but not to the same lengthy extent as this review took, but other than that, I'm hoping to get it out by the end of this year. But regardless, I'm heading back to play more of my Switch 2 and work on the next review I've got cooking. I'm Cruel Alchemist, and this has been my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake. Take care everyone, and happy 20th anniversary RE4.